Michael Afton, the son of William Afton and main protagonist of the Five Nights at Freddy's story, right? Well, we assume so, but with the release of the Character Encyclopedia, a book giving in-depth descriptions of a whole lot of characters, even ridiculous FNAF AR skins, he was nowhere to be seen and missing from the entire book, besides a single mention. So to make sure we're confident about who Michael is, his impact on the story, and when we see him throughout the franchise, first of all subscribe, and then let's go on the search for Michael Afton. In FNAF 1, the Night Guard is named Mike Schmidt, and we'd later learn from multiple sources such as the Ultimate Guide, Sister Location, and the Logbook that this is Michael Afton. He faces off against the animatronics for 7 nights before being fired for tampering with the animatronics, general unprofessionalism, and odor. Moving on to FNAF 2, and the guard we play as for the first 6 nights is Jeremy Fitzgerald, who eventually gets moved to the day shift after night 6 and becomes victim to the infamous
Bite of 87.
However, on the 7th custom night we play as someone named Fritz Smith, who gets fired for the same reasons as Mike from FNAF 1, tampering with the animatronics and odor, which seem to connect these two guards as one and the same. It seems that Michael is going to these locations under an alias, to hide his connection to his father and his family name, who at this point his father is heavily suspected to be a murderer, which is why he only goes by his nickname with a fake surname or a completely fake name. Moving on to FNAF 3, where we are never really given the guard's name. However, through all the nights leading up to the fire, we're playing as someone who has seen both the FNAF 1 animatronics and the FNAF 2 animatronics, in order to hallucinate them due to the agony in the location. The reason they're burned is because it's foreshadowing the fire that's about to happen, like we hear Phone Dude talk about multiple times. Not only did Scott Cawthon himself confirm that we got everything right and uncovered the story of FNAF 3, but something else that points the FNAF 3 guard to Michael is the Survival Logbook, which is owned by Michael. This logbook takes place during the nights at FNAF 3, due to having the office in the background of several images. Although this could just mean the FNAF 3 office was based on this, I find it unlikely due to how it's a perfect replica to the point it contains the shells of the toy animatronics. The logbook itself taking place during FNAF 3 gives us even more reason to have it, due to anything left from the fire being sold at the public auction we hear about in the final newspaper. We also see it contains information about the spring locks, which no one would be talking about in FNAF 1 times, but would be talked about publicly when someone like Phone Dude finds out about them, and he himself is perfectly fine talking about them in the future phone calls. Next we move on to FNAF 4, which is usually the most debated section. However, not only do we hear the FNAF 1 phone calls, which only Michael would hear, but the gameplay is very reminiscent of FNAF 1 itself too. Not only that, but the Survival Logbook comes in handy once again, directly telling us that Michael has the FNAF 4 nightmares. Yes, we learn in Sister Location that they were real to some degree, but the current consensus is that William experimented on the crying child with illusion discs to make him scared and keep him away from the animatronics, not wanting his son to accidentally meet the same fate as his daughter. That in the later years, the crying child somehow gives Michael these nightmares to go through, and causes his memories to mix in and out of each other, which is why we hear the FNAF 1 phone calls, see things from the crying child's deathbed, and why Michael's as small as the child in the gameplay. However, no matter how or why the crying child gives Michael these nightmares, or who actually experienced the real things, one thing's for certain: Michael has the FNAF 4 nightmares as we play through them, as confirmed multiple times now. Michael's backstory, however, is shown in the FNAF 4 minigames between the nights, where Michael bullies his brother and accidentally causes his death, apologizing to him on his deathbed, which is assumed to kickstart his character's entire redemption arc, and the main reason he's so involved with everything family and Freddys related. Moving on to quite an easy one to figure out, Sister Location, which immediately tells us we're playing as Mike. At the end of Sister Location, he gets his innards scooped out of his body after being tricked by his sister, and is instead filled with Ennard as the body begins to rot away, causing it to be unusable for Ennard, whom Michael then throws up as he begins dying, although continuing to live on with the power of Remnant. He then goes on to say in his speech for William that he's going to come after him and find him. Something we learn about Sister Location in the Survival Logbook though, is that the Immortal and the Restless show that we watch in between nights is actually just symbolism for the world gaslighting Michael, as he claims he relates to Clara because everything about this place is crazy and no one seems to notice except me. But it also seems to be about Michael's story itself. Within the show, we're introduced to Vlad, Clara, and the child, which I personally believe to be William, Michael, and the missing children's incident itself. To prove this, let me go through the episodes while visually proving how this correlates to Michael and the MCI. The first episode is about how Clara wants Vlad to take accountability for what he's doing, which Vlad gaslights him saying he has nothing to do with it. The second episode continues the argument as the baby is causing trouble in the nursery, and now Vlad attempts to leave for work, which Clara says they'll dock his paycheck. Vlad, however, says he has no job, and Clara thinks he's lying. The third, or technically fourth, episode is then about how the argument is at its peak, Clara burning down Vlad's house. The final episode shows how he eventually takes accountability and they make up, which either means nothing due to it being in the fake ending for a reason, or could just be meaning how Afton is forced to take accountability for his actions, as he and Michael burned together. Anyways, finally in FNAF 6 we hear from Henry how we're playing as a brave volunteer, which he assumes wouldn't want to get out of the fire and instead rest with the others, which is pretty self-explanatory that we play as Michael in FNAF 6. We also know that Michael Afton isn't the crying child like some people still believe after all this time, mostly due to a poster we see in this game containing what seems to represent the Afton family, showing Michael as the ventriloquist doll who's extremely similar to his father, as we know is the case with William and Michael, and is shown to be entirely separate to what's representing the crying child himself, who died at the hands of Fredbear. And in Security Breach we see the Afton family table, clearly showing that there are 5 members of the family, which if Michael is somehow the crying child would make there only 4. From here on out, Michael Afton is dead and gone, right? Well, unknowingly to a lot of people, when all the FNAF AR emails were being leaked and spread everywhere, there was one that I haven't seen touched on a lot really, something that specifically says alert to not Michael, but M. Afton.
M. Afton.
Yeah, which to me, I don't want it to be true, but Michael might still be here somewhere, but it could have been cut simply due to it not being canon anymore and now untrue. But I do think it's something that should be pointed out, as well as how the room Michael watches TV in sister location is in Security Breach, which itself contains the wall code about building the breath. There are also some theories that he possesses Glamrock Freddy, but let's save that question for another video. All this stuff about his future is just food for thought, but for now I'm counting Michael as dead, due to how any possible healing or supernatural effects that Remnant would have had on him would have been neutralized from the fire, like we learn happens to Remnant after being overheated in the Scooper blueprints. One major question that came from the Character Encyclopedia, however, is why remove Michael? I genuinely think this is because Scott doesn't want to confirm he's the player in every single game, even if it's basically certain at this point. But even if he went with the bare basics like some other characters and said that he's only 100% in FNAF 1 and sister location, then everyone would assume that means it's been debunked that he's the other game's guards too. However, this might not be the actual reason, considering the missing children were also left out despite being incredibly important too, and even Phone Guy was left out despite having no theories about him and everything about him being certain. But either way, there we go. Despite the Character Encyclopedia not including him, I think it's very safe to say that we play as Michael Afton in every single FNAF game, up until his death in FNAF 6. Hope you guys enjoyed, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.